Coby, welcome to the show.
Hi, good afternoon for you. Yeah.
Look, I'm sitting here in Australia where it's fairly safe. You're sitting in Israel, and I'm reading the press every day of the week with different slants either way. Coby, what's it like in Israel at the moment? And what's it like being a chief exec leading a business in Israel at the moment?
Oh, that's the situation here is very hard to explain. We're bombed. I guess there are dozens of bombs every day falling on Israel. There are many, again, dozens of villages, towns that have been destroyed, and people, more than 100,000 people have been evacuated from their homes for more than 10 months already. There's a war going on. Having said that, and very unfortunately, this has been going on since before I was born, and I've been through so many of these cycles, and Israel has been through so many cycles. So Israel is a very strong country and knows how to defend itself. And the industry already, many, many years ago, decades ago, has defined this motto that we deliver no matter what, and we're not going to allow anyone to complain that because of this situation, the Israeli industry misses milestones or anything. So, on October 7th, just a few hours after this whole thing started and we realized what was going on, the management team was already communicating. We already activated our contingency plans, and we have a clear business continuity plan. I sent a clear message to the team. I said, listen, guys, we're in war. We all need to contribute. We all need to help out. Everyone's encouraged to volunteer and to go help as much as you can under one condition. We are not allowed under any circumstances to miss any milestone, any delivery that we committed to a customer or a partner or anything like that. And I think that was basically the message that I gave the market as well. I think a few days later, we issued an ASX release and made it clear to everyone. Weebit is continuing, quotes, as normal. And I can tell you our lab and testing and everything, didn't stop for a second because of the war. Everything's been going on as normal, again, as much as you can say as normal. But in terms of the business, there has been no impact by this war.
But it's not necessarily going to be the same as all other cycles, is it? If we understand what the potential could be and the threats that they're talking about and the escalation, what they're potentially talking about. And I appreciate everything you've just said. And, some of the CEOs here in Australia just worrying and missing on their numbers, but you've got a different circumstances playing out in front of you. How do you actually lead and how do you engage? This is a leadership discussion, Coby, so we'll get to business in a second, but from that perspective, has it brought a new dimension out of your leadership?
Well, yeah, a CEO is a leader of a company. And, we can talk about, my leadership philosophy. I think the first thing is you lead by example. That's what you learn in Israel. That's one of the things that in the Israeli army, they teach you. I'm an officer in the Israeli Air Force. And they teach you that again and again, you lead by example. And so, I basically, gave the message to the team. I told them, yes, this is maybe more serious. By the way, we've had many very serious times before. I've lived through the 6-day war where everyone was sure that the country was, that's it. We're shutting down. I've lived through the Yom Kippur War, which was very extreme. I've lived through, so many different wars and other extreme cases. The message was very clear to the team. You just need to give them a very simple and confident message and lead by example. I was working even harder during the last 10 months. We have so many committed to deliver, and we're working on it. And I think that's basically it.
And your peers, what's the other CEOs saying? Is everyone staying staying put or people departing the country?
Oh, no. Everyone, again, the Israeli industry was through this many times before. I remember, back in the 80s during the Gulf War, Intel was, just in its early phases. I'm sorry, in the 90s in the Gulf War. Intel was still in the early phases of starting to do most of its or many of its processor designs in Israel. And, Intel made it a point to deliver no matter what. They set up a kindergarten in the offices so that people could bring their kids and continue to work, et cetera, et cetera. Dadi grew up in that environment, Dadi, our chairman. And I was at the same time at National Semiconductor. We did similar things. And we just made sure that we're continuing to work, and that's already back in the 90s that I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember everyone was so surprised that Intel didn't miss even one milestone. They came out with their new microprocessor on time, and the Intel CEO commented on it that he can actually rely on Intel Israel even under war more than maybe he can on other teams, etc. So this is something that's very important in Israel for all of us, for all the CEOs, to show that business is continuing as usual. There is an impact. The startups, suddenly there's no funding and they're struggling, and there's it's not like there's zero impact, but we're minimizing it as much as we can.
Yeah, I was going to ask you a little bit about that. Your key stakeholders or your shareholders or the investor community, what are you having to say to them?
Again, I didn't see anyone who decided to stop investing in Weebit specifically right now. We didn't have anyone who told me, because of this war or something like that, I'm not going to keep my shares in Weebit, I'm going to sell or whatever. We gave a clear message a few days after the war started. We're going to deliver no matter what. Our team is working hard. We are delivering. There hasn't been anything that was impacted in Weebit because of the war. That I can say in a very clear way. And, our lab and where we're doing all the tests, it's in a shelter, in a bomb shelter facility. So it's protected and it's working 24/7. And, everything is continuing, again, as planned.
Coby, so what is Weebit Nano? Share to the audience what the business is.
So Weebit is in the semiconductor industry. Semiconductors, for those who don't realize it, are what fuels the world today. Everything relies on semiconductors. And, since we're talking about investors and shareholders, I believe that today 9 out of the top 10 market cap companies in the world are semiconductor companies. If it's NVIDIA and Apple and Google and Facebook and Intel and others, Qualcomm, etc. All these big companies are basically semiconductor companies. They live on semiconductors. Anything that you touch today, your microwave, your refrigerator, I'm not even talking about your laptop or your smartwatch or stuff, it's all semiconductors. The headphone that you have on your ears right now, it's all semiconductors, right? So now in this domain, one of the most critical sections is memory. Everything basically relies on memory. You need to put the code somewhere. You need to put the data somewhere. And when you're talking about memory, there's a subsection which is called non-volatile memory, the memory that doesn't lose its data even when you unplug it from power. This is critical, of course, because, battery runs out or whatever. Every electronic device in the world has that magical moment that you turn it on the first time and you want there to be some software in it and some data and everything so that it starts operating. That's non-volatile memory. And that's what Weebit does. Weebit is developing the next generation of non-volatile memory, which basically it's out there now, and it is replacing the old technology, which has been around for decades. It's called flash. And it's, I think today it's not the next generation because it's becoming the current generation of memory technology. The world is really realizing now that this transition needs to happen. I think over the past year, we've seen a major transition in the mindset of the industry, that people understand now that our technology, ReRAM, is here. It's available for mass production. And it will become the dominant technology in the future.
So compared to your competitors, I understand Taiwan is a major capital or major country which invests in exactly what your industry does. What's your point of difference compared to some of those in that part of the world?
So there are several things we need to clarify. When we're talking about Taiwan, Taiwan is a manufacturing powerhouse.
Yes.
And maybe early on in this discussion, there are just a few terms that are very important for me to clarify. So semiconductors are very, very difficult to manufacture. That you're talking about, people talk about nanometers. You'll hear me mentioning nanometers. Nanometers are 10 to the minus 9 of a meter. And
Right.
that's basically the size of the components that we're talking about. Putting those elements into place with that level of accuracy requires very, very, very expensive machinery.
Mm-hmm.
The place where you manufacture semiconductors, it's called a fab. Even the simplest fabs cost billions of dollars to set up. Just recently there was an announcement in Israel that Intel is going to invest $25 billion to build a new fab, one fab. Okay, I've stood in buildings that cost $30 billion to build. So because of that, even companies like NVIDIA, Apple, Google, Facebook, Qualcomm, Broadcom, whatever, Cisco, they can't really afford to have their own fab. It just doesn't make any sense. It's way too expensive. And so you have these companies that are called foundries that offer manufacturing services to the public, basically. And the biggest one, well known, is Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, or TSMC. And they manufacture for Apple and many other companies. So Taiwan has become a manufacturing powerhouse. By the way, there are some companies that continue to manufacture for themselves, very few. Intel and Samsung as examples. Those are called IDMs. And so you have the foundries and you have the IDMs. But so in Taiwan, they're a manufacturing powerhouse. We are developing a technology for those manufacturing plants. We're developing a memory technology, and basically we give a license to manufacturing facilities and teach them and train them on how you manufacture our memory technology. Okay, so that's kind of just to clarify a little bit the terms. Weebit is at this point focused on what's called IP licensing. We don't manufacture products ourselves. We develop the technology, and then we give licenses to the manufacturing facilities. We give licenses to the product companies. The manufacturing facilities, we give them a manufacturing license. To the product companies, we give them a design license. And, there's this triangle where, the product company takes our technology, designs it into their product, and then they go to these manufacturing facilities to manufacture it. So that's to basically clarify the background. Now, specifically, you were asking about competition. So there's the technology, which is called flash. It's been around and it's been hitting so many walls, and people, for more than 10 years already have been looking for a replacement for flash. There have been several attempts at finding something to replace flash. The one that really became the most successful one up to now is called MRAM. The M stands for magnetic, so magnetic random access memory. Mm-hmm. However, MRAM is out there. MRAM is in mass production. MRAM is being sold. But MRAM, first of all, it uses rare earth materials, and people don't really like that. Second, because of that, the manufacturing process is very expensive. You need to have a separate manufacturing facility because these materials actually contaminate a fab. So you want to have a separate manufacturing line for it. The actual manufacturing process is very difficult. So the added cost, when you add an MRAM, you're basically adding 30, 40 plus % to the cost of your basic silicon wafer that you're manufacturing. Our technology, which is called ReRAM, resistive RAM, is, and Weebit has been very focused on using only standard materials in its ReRAM. So we can go into a standard manufacturing line. We're using standard materials, and the manufacturing process itself is also very simple. So we actually add just less than 10% to the cost of the wafer. By the way, flash adds, 10, 20% to the cost of the wafer. So we're actually very competitive on price and in the simplicity and easiness of manufacturing. Our technology is also in so many parameters more advanced than flash. It is orders of magnitude lower power consumption, and today, when everything is run on batteries and stuff, that's critical. It is, I already mentioned cheaper. It has much higher endurance, but even more than anything, you can manufacture it in the small geometries. So I was talking about nanometers, and the world, and there's this thing called Moore's law, which I think many people probably heard of already. Everything is shrinking in semiconductors, and you can put a lot more on a single piece of silicon now because the geometries are going down. Flash is basically stuck at the 40, 28 nanometer level. And now that, NVIDIA is working on 3 and 2 nanometer, NVIDIA, Apple, etc., they're already down to very small geometries. They need a solution that they can put on their chip. We've already demonstrated that we have silicon in our hands at 22 nanometer. We've already, in simulation, demonstrated we can go down to, very close to 10 nanometer, and we know we can even go down below that. So that makes us very competitive. Now, just to summarize this and not make this a whole big lecture, but developing a ReRAM technology is very, very, very difficult. And so, there were quite a few companies that tried to develop ReRAM technology and basically failed. There are 3 ReRAM technologies in the world today that have reached what's called qualification, which is basically a stamp of approval that they're ready for mass production. Weebit is one of those 3, and it's the only independent one. The other 2 are actually in the hands of fabs, of foundries that are using it, but they'll never give it to another manufacturing facility. So Weebit is in a very, very strong position today in the market because basically all of the other manufacturing facilities, the fabs, the IDMs that want ReRAM, and everyone, as I said, in the last year especially, it's become very clear to everyone, ReRAM is the future. So they actually have one option right now, which is Weebit, and that's why we're engaged with so many of them, and we're making very good progress. And I'm extremely bullish about the future of Weebit.
So what do you need to succeed then, Coby?
Well, focus and just go through this, the sales process, getting this technology out the doors in semiconductors. It's very, very difficult and time-consuming. I mentioned, these fabs are so expensive. These companies are very, very, very conservative, very cautious. They don't want to bring anything in that might contaminate in any way,
yep,
or change anything in the process. So they go through a very severe due diligence with us, and they want to know that we meet whatever standards, parameters that they need. Each one of them goes to their customers and see what the customers want, and they want to make sure that we can meet the voltage levels that they want, the power levels that they want, the leakage levels that they want, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In semiconductors, everything takes time. One of the things that I tell people, a manufacturing process in semiconductors, I send it to manufacturing. It takes order of magnitude of half a year till I get silicon back and I can actually check it and see what's happening. It's not software that you hit a button, you compile it, and within minutes you have a new executable. Everything takes a lot of time. Everything is very, very difficult in the sense of, and the negotiations and so on. So that's why it's been taking Weebit so long, where, on the one hand, you'd say, oh, wait a minute, everyone needs it. Everyone understands they need ReRAM. This is the future. They have basically one solution. Why the hell don't you have already dozens of agreements signed? Well, and by the way, everyone always wants to see that someone else took that big risk and signed with us first. So we have now a couple of foundries that signed up with us, and that's already helping us a lot. We can actually show working silicon, etc. But people are still extremely cautious. I believe that, as we sign 1, 2, 3 more agreements, the guard bands that people put up, all of these, big protection walls will come down, and things will start rolling much faster. And it's very close now. It's very close. So we're getting there.
So what's the scale of the organization now in terms of people, circa revenues, if you share a bit of that, but also then, if this goes to the direction that you anticipate, what's your plans in 5 years?
So Weebit, we've been extremely cautious in our growth. One of the things that I, as a CEO that's been around for a while, as you can tell by my gray hair already, I know that it's very easy to do a raise, several tens of millions of dollars and start, spending things and growing and hiring, etc. We've been extremely cautious with our money. So we didn't grow like crazy. Today, Weebit is roughly 40 engineers or 40 people. We have most of the team in Israel, but I think it's something like 13 people in France, which, by the way, again, talking about the concerns that people had before, a big chunk of our R&D is done in France and not in Israel, if that helps people in any way. And we use subcontractors for different things because we need to do so many things in parallel. In terms of revenues, we just started getting very small revenues. We announced at the end of last year that we got some initial revenues. I think our yearly report will come out soon, and people will see, how we're ramping up revenues. I told the market from day one, and we're not even giving guidance yet, because right now the deals, people are still so cautious that the deals that we sign have a lot of contingencies in them, and people, have payments based on milestones and things like that.
Yep.
So it will grow slowly. The business model here, again, I'm talking about IP licensing. We sign an agreement with a company, then we need to transfer the technology to them. Again, this is semiconductors, just teaching them how to manufacture our technology, even though we're using standard materials, the tools that they already have in the fab, etc. Just teaching them and doing those initial rounds to get that going is easily 9 months or plus. And then we just announced, for example, with DB High-Tech, a big Korean manufacturing foundry that we're working with, that we did what's called a tape out. We sent to manufacturing. And again, it takes about half a year roughly to start getting first silicon back. So it's a long process, until you get that qualification stamp that I was talking about. So, our plans are, for example, in DB High-Tech to get to qualification mid-next year, and that's when you can go into mass production. Now, even then, you need to bring in the product companies, and they also have their ramp-up time, etc., until they design you into their products and things like that. So scales in semiconductor, and I repeat that many times because I know it's very hard for people to understand, the time scales are long. However, when we sign up with such a foundry like DB HiTek has hundreds of customers. Some of them are big name customers like Sony, Toshiba, Mitsubishi, and even Intel and others manufacture there. So, they have all of these customers, and each one of these customers has, many dozens or even hundreds of products that they manufacture. So when we sign an agreement with a foundry, it takes time, but that we will get it qualified and we will get the customers on board and there will be products using it. And, it's going to take a few years, but there's going to be a strong ramp up. And by the way, once you get in there, you're there for decades. These kinds of technologies, once people adopt them, they're in for decades. So the ramp up is going to be there, and we're going to be, if you're talking about 5 years, in 5 years, we're already going to be licensed by, I expect, by the, I can even say majority of the top foundries and IDMs. And in many of them, we should already be at the point where their customers are starting to mass produce, and there's going to be that ramp up of royalties that we're going to get from the sales of these products. So, at a certain point, and it's going to take a few years, but at a certain point, there is that hockey stick when the royalties start coming in. And again, this is a huge market. By the way, the non-volatile memory market is expected to reach close to $200 billion in the next several years. It's a huge market.
Okay.
We are focused on a subset of that market, which is the emerging memory. The embedded memory, where people embed our technology into their design. Again, I was talking about Moore's Law and everything shrinking.
Yes.
Today, people normally do what's called a system on a chip. They can put a full system on a single chip now. They can put a processor, they can put the communication, they can put the sensors, they can put all these things. Obviously, they need memory in there. And so they embed the memory into that chip. And that's what we give them a design license to do. And so, the embedded market itself, the margins there, by the way, again, talking about the economies, you don't have any capital that you need to put in there. You're not buying anything. So the margins are close to 100%. And therefore, the multipliers of companies in the IP space, if you go and check several of the other companies, it's 50x or even closer to 100x of the revenue. So when you talk about revenues, which are not that big, the market cap of the companies are normally already very high just because of these huge multipliers that people put on IP companies. To give an example, maybe the company that's closest to us, eMemory in Taiwan, they do very simple memories, nothing near what we do really. But they sell about $100 million. Their market cap, I think, is, $6+ billion. That kind of to give people the feeling again where we're going. And we expect to grow with ReRAM and the potential of ReRAM. It's a much more advanced memory.
Coby, the only thing I'm thinking about out loud, I guess, of all technology companies or advancement, there's always the fear of someone copying. Now, how do you overcome that?
Well, first of all, ReRAM is a technology that takes, more than 20 years to develop.
Is that right?
This is a very difficult technology. The three technologies that are out there today that are qualified, they've been under development for basically 20 years. Now, you'll say, wait a minute, Weebit is only 10 years old, so what's going on here? But we have partnered with Leti, with an R&D center in France that has been researching ReRAM for more than 20 years, and they have a lot of experience, and we're basically leveraging their know-how and their experience. So, we know who's out there and who's potentially going to get to to qualification, and there really, there's maybe one or two others that might be getting there in the near future. I don't know if to say near future even, but they might be getting there. There aren't many companies that are trying to develop ReRAM right now. It's a major effort. I tell people, even Intel and Samsung tried to develop ReRAM, and they ended up giving up. Now, it's not because they don't have the resources or the know-how or anything. They just didn't have the management focus. This thing requires over many years, very focused management that is, waking up, going to sleep, having ReRAM in their minds all the time. You need to have, by the way, to develop ReRAM, I mentioned it's a very complex technology, nothing like the memories that eMemory is selling, because ReRAM requires a very strong, what's called a device team. And we have, I think, 13 PhDs in physics and chemistry in Weebit that are developing on the device side. Okay, this is very difficult technology to get it to work in, as I said, in the voltages and currents and power and all these different parameters that you need to meet. And then you have the process team that basically needs to take that device and see how the hell can you actually manufacture it in a fab. How can you take it to a fab and using the machinery in the fab actually manufacture it in a cost-effective manner. And we have a very strong team on the process side. We have someone who was a fab manager, and we have many people who are leading managers in fabs that know how to do this. And then, so at that point, you have one memory bit. Now you need to go to the analog guys who take all these bits, put them together into a memory array, and they need to build the whole control logic around it of how do you actually read and write from this memory. And that's a huge process, and you have so much intelligence and patents around it, and it's a very smart technology. And then once those guys are done, you have the digital designers who actually need to take this memory module and now build the interface to the rest of the world, because guess what? The world is digital. I mean, the technology world, the semiconductor world is digital, and they need to do that. You need to have these four teams, and actually I didn't even go into the characterization team and the testing team and the other teams, but you basically need to have these teams. Each one of them needs to be very strong. And they need to be working very closely together under a very focused management. Do you know how many times we have the device guys who come and say, the demands from this fab are impossible. They want us to reach these voltage levels, or this, they want us to shrink the memory bit size to something impossible. We can't do that. And then the analog guys say, don't worry, we can work with our analog circuitry. We can solve that problem. And there's this cooperation going on. So Weebit today, and to the best of my knowledge, Weebit is the only company in the world that has all of these disciplines, very strong teams, cooperating, working together. The other two options, by the way, you'll say, wait a minute, there are two others that are qualified. Those are actually fabs or foundries that are offering that technology to their customers. Now, foundries have very strong device and process team, obviously. Foundries don't focus on the design side so much. So now when customers come, the product companies come and say, hey, I want to have this memory module embedded in my chip, but I need to do some adjustments because I want it to be a little bit different so that it fits well into that chip and the interfaces like this and whatever. The foundries, they don't have, those teams that will go and do that. And so that's where Weebit has this very, very big strength. And we're, I think that we're very competitive, and we have, an amazing potential now in the market.
So, Coby, this next generation of technology that you were just highlighting to us, how long do you see it existing before it gets superseded? So I'm going to invest. I'd be very interested in that. Obviously, you spent a lot of time to get it to where it is, and you're on the cusp now. How long is this generation going to be in play for?
Well, Flash has been around for, I think, 40 years easily. These technologies are very difficult to develop, but once they're there, they're there. And as I said, once that you go into a foundry and people are using you to manufacture products, you're there for decades. First of all, many of these products have, long life of, they're sold. Some things, might be sold for just a few years and you have the next generation and the next generation. But many products actually have a lifetime of, 10, 15, 20 years. By the way, part of the requirements of qualification are many tests that you need to show that you have the endurance and the retention levels, et cetera, for over 10 years. That's basically the basic tests are, you need to show that the technology will survive more than 10 years once you manufacture a product with it. And by the way, many products actually require us to demonstrate that we can do a lot more than 10 years. Many products, they want to know that if they use our technology, it'll survive more than 20 years. So this is once a foundry, once a fab adopts us, it's going to be around for decades.
So if it's all so exciting, why did you come down to Australia to raise some money? And why did you list on the Australian Stock Exchange, the ASX? You didn't go to North America? Didn't go to AIM?
Well, first of all, Israel, as you might know, it's a technology powerhouse, and we have here a lot of venture capital and investments and things like that. So I guess the key question is what happened here. But what happened was back, you go back 10 years or more than 10 years when Weebit started. And, at that time, the venture capital community in Israel was very focused on cyber, on automotive, on AI. Software stuff in general is so much easier. The time cycles are shorter. You can have these big hits and stuff like that. So, semiconductor, come on. And by the way, in those days, the whole world was kind of in the mode of who wants to invest in semiconductors. So we were looking for money. And it turns out that at the same time, the ASX was looking at its portfolio and they said, oh, we have all these mining companies. We have these energy, gas companies and stuff, some finance. But we need something young, energetic, dynamic. And so they started sending delegations. They sent several delegations to Israel to look for technology companies. And that's where, 1 + 1. By the way, Weebit, together with roughly 20 other Israeli technology companies, ended up listing on the ASX. So that's basically the background. We quickly found out that in Australia, nobody knows what semiconductors are. It's quite a challenge, but I'm glad to say that our shareholders, they've been curious. I've been working with them, and I'm happy that I'm in Australia and in the ASX because we have amazing shareholders.
And Coby, how do the Israelis take on failure in the sense of, if I look at it in Australia, we're a startup, I give it a go, it fails, and it's pretty harsh here in Australia. Your confidence is knocked for a 6-9 times out of 10. What's the mentality there? You've had to go get up again and dust yourself off onto the next one?
Well, that's a huge difference between Israeli mentality and most other countries. In Israel, when we look at someone who had a startup and he failed, we say, okay, now he knows what not to do in the next one. He has already the experience. He has the scars on his back. He'll do much better next time. In most of the world, when you fail, they say, oh, you're a failure. Now, startups are all about taking risks. I mean, we're talking about venture, right? That's the key word here.
Yeah.
Startups are about taking risks. Startups are about having this crazy idea that everyone tells you you're insane and pushing it forward. And guess what? A lot of startups fail. But the experience that people get while they are trying to ramp up this startup, while they are trying to sell it, while they're trying to do things, etc., many times they fail also because they were just not in the right time. They were either too early to the market or too late, or because many times it's because of, whatever other things that happen that are unrelated to the company. Right now in Israel, I know of startups that are going bankrupt just because they can't get funding because of the war, and
Yep.
international investors don't want to take the risk right now of investing in an Israeli company and things like that. They
Yeah.
have a great idea. They have great technology, but, it is what it is, right? So the fact that your company went under doesn't mean that you're a failure. And in most cases, you can be a very smart guy, done very good things, and, it just happened. But hey, now you have that experience. I'd rather hire someone like that to be the CEO of the next company than someone who's, no experience and hasn't done anything in his life.
All right, let's go back a little bit. Didn't you want to be a nuclear physicist?
Well, and now you're going a lot back.
Yeah, well, that's true, isn't it?
Yeah. When I originally enrolled to the university, and we're talking about back in 1978, computers and semiconductors and stuff were brand new. People hardly knew what they were. I hardly knew what they were. And for me, the big thing at the time was, what's going to be really exciting? So I actually was going to enroll to nuclear physics. I was lucky enough that one of the good friends of my dad was working in the unemployment service. And he basically told my dad, he said, I'd love to see your son very often, but I'm not sure under these circumstances. And the message was clear. And a very good friend of mine who was already becoming a computer geek, at that time, he convinced me to actually switch and go into semiconductor. And so I ended up starting, my studies on the semiconductor side, and I guess the rest is history.
Well, you want to talk us through that, because you did work on some pretty exciting new technologies, didn't you? And you moved to France.
Well, first of all, I started my studies. By the way, in Israel, as you probably can imagine, when you're 18, you're drafted.
Yes.
I actually, because the education level in Israel, at least at the time, was much higher than most of the world, and I was in the U.S. My family was moving around from country to country all the time. And, when I was in high school, I was actually in Texas. And so I managed to skip a few grades, and I started my university studies before I was 18 in the University of Texas at San Antonio.
Yep.
So when I came back to Israel, I actually did a deal with the Army. There's this program where you can actually finish your studies first and then join the Army and work in what you studied. So I actually went and finished my studies first. And then I joined the Army, and I was 5 years in the Air Force, but on the technology side. And already got exposed to all kinds of very interesting technologies. In parallel to that, and it's a long story and I won't go into all the details, they allowed me in the evenings to start working at National Semiconductor. And so I started gaining experience in semiconductors already in 1980. Even during my studies, I already started part-time in National Semiconductor. And at the time, it was, completely different world. I learned a lot there. National was a great school. I was there 11 years.
Yes.
And then in 1991, it was time for me to move on. And I saw this big ad in the newspaper, join the world's #1 computer team. And it was just, I couldn't resist it. I called them up. There was a European supercomputer project that was building up in France. And so I moved to France for 3 years, and I became what's called the CAD manager. I was responsible for all of the tools that the engineers needed in order to build a supercomputer. Now, I think you can realize a supercomputer is one heck of a design, and there are so many different disciplines there. And I got exposure to so many different sides of semiconductors and everything. It was an unbelievable school. And by the way, they hired people from all over the world. They wanted to have the experts from all over the world there. We had about 20 different nationalities there. It was a Tower of Babel. And it was a great school also for the different cultures in the world.
Yes.
And I think I learned so much. I mean, by then, I actually already lived in many countries. As a kid, my parents moved around. When I was 3 months old, we moved to Uruguay. And then when I was in elementary school, I lived 4 years in New York. And I already mentioned I was in Texas and stuff. I've already been exposed to many different cultures and people and so on. So for me, it was actually a great place to improve my understanding of all of these international cultures. I also, being on the side of buying the tools, it gave me that initial financial expertise. I was negotiating very big deals for the company buying things. But that, kind of set the stage later on when I moved on to the business side. So that was a very interesting technology in France, like you mentioned. And, of course, then I can go on to the other companies that I was.
Well, I was going to say, but wasn't this... Well, Phil, let me ask one question. I know I should have asked a bit earlier. You did move around as a young man of your parents. What did your parents do?
Well, they worked in what's called the Jewish Agency. In Israel, there's this organization that basically is responsible for maintaining the relationship between Israel and the different Jewish communities in the world. And so they send people to the different communities to actually help, build the community life, the Jewish life, the Jewish community centers or things like that. And even if people want to immigrate to Israel, they help them. So my parents were doing that. That's what they did in Uruguay. That's what they did in New York and in Texas. And I guess I got that bug in me, and I continued to move around when I was an adult.
Okay, so let's go back to France for a sec. So you're on the other side of the table. You're negotiating and charging, pushing back on the cost sensitivities. A couple of years later, aren't you on the front end out there trying to win work in a corporate development sales career?
Well, I got to learn. I mean, one thing that I learned how the buyer thinks, which is really important. I had that experience of I was a buyer, and I basically learned all of the tactics that buyers use against salespeople. So later on, when I was a salesperson, I already knew, and I understood what the buyers were doing, which of course helped me quite a bit on the sales side. So yeah, it was definitely a good school for me before I moved to being on the business side.
Yeah, okay, but it also takes you out of the technical side in some part as well, doesn't it? And allows you to develop those interpersonal skills that obviously helped you as a CEO. Can you talk us through? There's a couple of career steps, but I want to get to the big one where you joined Packetlight. And that was a business on its knees, wasn't it?
Yeah. So the story is, so after I was in France, I came back to Israel. And I think that the highlight of my career, which you kind of skipped, but I'll just mention it, was being part of the team that set up Vericity. And Vericity for me was maybe before Weebit, it was the highlight of my career.
So this is in Silicon Valley?
No, this is in Israel. Although I moved around. So in Israel, so when we started Vericity, and maybe just a few words about Vericity before I go to Packetlight. But when we started Vericity, we were basically 4 engineers and one guy that we brought as an expert CEO. And the team said, well, we need someone to take care of business. Coby, you're an engineer, but you already know what this business side of things. You were in France already dealing with these things. So you're going to be sales, marketing, support, all of those other things. And, obviously being in that role, I ended up moving after a year or so couple of years. I moved to Silicon Valley. We hired a professional salesperson, an amazing salesperson, which I learned a lot from her. And she actually forced me to move into sales because I kept telling everyone, hey, I'm an engineer. I don't even know how to sell, heaters to the Eskimos. There's no way I can be a salesperson. And she was the one who recognized the potential. And she, you could say, at gunpoint, she forced me to become a salesperson. And I owe her a lot because I really, in retrospect, I think that was maybe the one most critical point in my career. Veracity, I moved to Silicon Valley, and then from Silicon Valley, I helped set up the U.S. business, and then, remotely started building the Asian business. Then I moved to Paris, and I set up the European business. So I was moving around also as part of Veracity, lived in different places. Bottom line is, after 10 years, we were already selling more than $100 million per year. We had a very strong team, a very strong position in the market. We sold the company to Cadence. That was, in those days, that was considered one of the big exits.
Hold on, Coby. What is Veracity? What did it actually do?
Veracity was developing a technology to verify that semiconductors do what they're supposed to. Basically verify that they did the functionality correctly and they didn't have any bugs in them. And as these chips became more and more complex, it became a huge challenge for engineers. So we had, a very strong technology that would really find those bugs. You need to understand, in software, you just hit a button, in a few minutes you have an executable, you run it and you say, there's another bug. Okay, let's fix it, let's do it. You can fix several rounds in a day. In semiconductors, it takes half a year to get the silicon back.
Yep.
So you cannot afford to have even one bug. You have to make absolutely sure that you cleaned all the bugs before you do that tape out. And our technology would really very, very intensively run so many different crazy scenarios through this product of yours in an automated way, and it was a very, very critical element at the time for the engineers.
So, what was the big lesson for you about growing, or the growth agenda? As you said, it grew dramatically, and it was a great sale. So, talk us through, what did you learn?
Oh, I learned a lot. At that time. First of all, I was building sales teams all over the world. So, again, I was leveraging the knowledge that I already had about different cultures. But now, I guess you could say I was getting my PhD in different cultures. And that was critical because, one of the critical things about sales, and this is something that many people don't realize, we tend to... we grow up wanting to express ourselves and wanting to talk about things. And when salespeople meet customers, so often I see them just going into sales mode and they start talking about how good their product is and what are the advantages and this and that. And I always tell people, listen, first of all, learn who your customer is. Learn what their culture is. Learn how you're supposed to even approach them, because people in different countries in the world think differently. They have a different set of logic. They have different business culture. You need to understand how they work. The next thing is, when you meet them, let them talk. First of all, learn as much as you can about them, about their experience, about their needs. That will enable you to then take your presentation and tailor it to them. Take your product and focus on the advantages of this product for them, how it actually helps them resolve their issues and their challenges. And so that was something that I learned. I really learned and improved over that period. And I think that was one of the big keys to the success, was the fact that I worked with my sales team on, hey guys, listen, you go to that first meeting and you ask open-ended questions and let the people talk. People like to express, they have their internal pain. Don't block them. Don't, take charge of the discussion and you talk all the time. You have 2 ears and one mouth. You need to listen at least twice as much as you talk. And I think that was a key message that I learned. And then when you listen to people and you understand what their pain is, you can address it, and the chances of success are much higher. And that's how Vericity, if you think about it, we grew from zero. And in the first few years, it's semiconductors. The first few years, we didn't sell anything. We were actually just about to go bankrupt, like many startups in the beginning. You hit, I call it the near-death experience. Practically every startup that I know goes through that, and you need to know how to get out of it. And so Vericity for several years was not selling, and was actually, at that near-death experience, we even didn't have money to pay salaries for a few months, and we really needed to get through that. But then we started ramping up. We did the first few sales, and things took off. And as I mentioned, we got to more than $100 million per year sales, which was very difficult at the time. And it was considered one of the big successes of the industry in those days. And we sold the company.
So just on that, Coby, just going back, you got into 2 near-death experiences in business. So for all those startups, or people wanting to get that extra level, from your perspective and experience, what is the magic? And obviously it sounded like you made a call on the product. Did the people have the answer, not have the answer? Do you clean out staff quick? Like, how do you operate? Because you're bleeding cash.
Well, the most important thing, by the way, is not the product. The most important thing is the team. And a smart investor doesn't invest in the product. The smart investor will invest in the team, especially in startups, because I can almost guarantee that, when a startup starts, the product that it will eventually sell into the market is not going to be what they thought. They hit roadblocks. They hit like Packet Light. They were actually addressing the wrong market. They needed to change and address another market and change their product to be something else to address that product. Every company goes through these situations, through these near-death experiences and so on, every small company. The question is, does it have the management team? Does it have the team in general who can go through this and go through the transition and survive it? Does it have that level of resilience that it can go through that and survive and eventually grow and prosper? And that's what you need to look for in a team. And that's why my big emphasis, more than anything else as a manager, is I want to have the best possible team. I put, a huge, huge priority on hiring the right people and making sure that I have the team so that, how many times we had these cases in Weebit where we said, oh my God, the direction that we took is wrong. We're just not managing to get this thing to work and stuff. And we had to transition and modify things. But we have the team. We have these experts in the team that can see those things and say, oh, you know what? Let's change. We were using the wrong materials or the wrong stuff here. We need to change things. We need to be creative here. We need to do that. And I think that's why I'm so confident about Weebit today. Because you look at our board of directors, it's a phenomenal board of directors. It's just, you don't see big companies with such amazing names on their board. You look at the management team, the VPs that I have, heck, these guys are awesome. They are just so totally amazing. They have so much experience, so much knowledge. I basically, the only thing I need to do as a manager is not interfere and let them do their job. And I think that's the most important thing for a manager, to hire the best possible team and then just enable them to do their job and don't interfere.
All right, let me ask you 2 quick things on that. Selection process. Maybe you can talk us through. Obviously, we're I do it day in, day out as part of my gig as a search consultant. And every executive that we deal with has a different process in their mind or different set of skills they're looking for. But maybe you can share with us what goes through your mind or what key competencies or drive or values, etc., you may look for. That's the first thing. You got them. The second thing is, how do you keep them? Now, is this because you're going to tie me in because we're new? Is it share? Are we all bought in? Have I got skin in the game? How do you do it? Because if I'm that good, Coby, and I'm down the road as a competitor, I'm going to come knocking down on your door to take your best of your best. So how do you keep me locked in?
So, well, first of all, you need to go after the best people. Okay, that's the number one thing. You need to go after the best people. And by the way, sometimes I tell the team, if we see someone who's really good, even if we don't have the position right now, let's hire them because we know we'll need them, and very quickly they will already find a way to contribute. So it's very important to find them. Now, again, as I mentioned, we're hiring very selectively, and I only hire people when I really, when I know that they're going to contribute and everything. But first of all, you need to look for the good people. Now, when you're interviewing them, you need to sense for how much of a team player they are. For me, that's critical. I want to make sure that we have a strong team, that they work together. I want to make sure that they are creative and that they know how to deal with challenges that they weren't prepared for. I like to ask questions that are not standard, not the simple ones to challenge them. And I do check references also. Nowadays I'm actually, maybe lucky. I'm old enough and I know so many people in the industry that it's easy for me. Actually, I think I can say that, all of the VPs in the company, I've met them before. Many of them I knew very well before they joined the company. The amazing thing is that they still joined the company after they knew me, but that's so that's the number one thing. Hire the best possible people. And again, I've seen so many managers who actually want the people reporting them to be not to be a threat. And so they hire mediocre people because they don't want people to be a threat. For me, it's exactly the opposite. I don't want to hire anyone who's not better than me. I want everyone that I hire to be at least, as good as me and hopefully better than me, because that's how they contribute. The next step is giving them the environment where they can thrive, where they can grow, where they can work and express themselves and don't interfere. Enable them and don't interfere. And at the same time, be an example. I think the most important thing about management is you need to be an example. You should never ask your employees to do something that you are not doing yourself. And you should take care of them. I had one of my bosses way back was telling me, I don't understand. You're treating your team as if they're your kids. You're taking such care of them and everything. And that's it. I mean, now I'm extremely proud of the fact that in Weebit, I mentioned we have 40 employees. In my 7 years, there's only been one engineer who left the company. I think our retention rate right now is 98%. Nobody is leaving the company because we're making sure that they love coming to work. I say you have to wake up with a smile on your face. If you don't have a smile on your face, you need to find another place to work. And at Weebit, we want to challenge people. We want them to get up in the morning and say, wow, I have this thing that I really need to solve and I really need to make work and everything. And they go and they work with everyone. I have zero tolerance for politics. Okay, I have zero tolerance for any internal arguments and fighting. I mean, that just won't happen, wherever I am, and definitely. And so I'm very happy that at Weebit, the team is really working as a team. They work together. They're very strong in the way they cooperate, and I'm there to enable them. I sit in the management meetings, by the way. I hardly speak. because these people are so much smarter than me on so many of these topics. They are just, everyone's expressing their ideas. Yeah, I know that if I will say anything, I will automatically have, naturally, everyone starts aligning with whatever the boss says. So I intentionally don't talk. I let them express themselves. They're extremely smart people. I listen to all of the arguments. And then at the end, I compile everything that I heard, and, we can reach a decision. And I normally want to get confirmation from them. I don't dictate, because that doesn't make any sense with such people. Again, you have such good people. And by the way, one of the key things that people always make the mistake, people think that, their employees work for money. And that's the biggest mistake. People don't work for money. People want to be appreciated. People want to be recognized. People want to have excitement at work and fun at work, and that's what really counts. I can give you an example at Weebit. What was it, like 3-4 years ago? There was a situation in Israel where there was such a shortage of engineers that it was like impossible to get good engineers. And, suddenly one company was acquired by an American company, and the stupid people there didn't realize what they had in their hands, and they let go so many engineers. And so suddenly you have these engineers out there, and there's such a huge demand. I get a phone call from the VP R&D, and he says, Coby, you need to come to the office right away. There are 3 guys here who came to interview you if you're a good enough CEO for them. Literally, that's the situation. It turns out that the 3 of them left that company, and they decided they want to work as a team. And they were walking around, and they already had 5 different offers in their hand from other companies. And when they came to us, I think it was a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and they said, by Friday, we need to give answers to the other companies and stuff. And I said, well, first of all, if you guys are really good, those companies will wait. You can tell them you want another week, and, I'm not here to work under pressure. The second thing is, I need to, with all due respect, I want to understand who you are. We need to also make sure that you guys are a fit for Weebit. So, I need some time, and so we went and we checked, and we got very strong feedback about them. They're amazing guys. And we actually, at the time, we needed, 1 or 2 people in that profession, but we said, we'll take them as a team. And I gave them the offer. And the lead guy came to me and he said, Coby, I think there's a mistake here. Here's the offer that you gave me. Here's my last salary at that company. You offered me exactly what I had before. And I looked at him and I said, listen, first of all, you had a good salary. What can I say? Now, there's no way I can win versus 5 other companies if I try to compete on salary and whatever. That won't happen, okay? I'd like to maintain, in the company, there needs to be a certain logic. The salaries of the different people, they need to make sense and everything. And I said, go ask around, ask who Weebit is, ask who Coby is, and whatever. What I can offer you is work in a company that is dealing in a really, really interesting domain. You're going to have a boss that you're going to learn from. He's a very smart guy, and all the people around you are people that you can learn from and you can improve. You're going to have this amazing atmosphere in the company. And, I'm going to enable you to grow and prosper. That's what I can give you. Those 3 guys are working at Weebit now. And, I think it was a year or so after I hired them, that lead guy came to me and said, Coby, I worked already in 8 different companies. There's never been anything like Weebit. This is amazing. And for me, that was the best day, right? So that's the type of team we have at Weebit. We really put an emphasis on having the best people, and everyone in the company recognizes that their peers are the best people in their domain, and there's a very high level of respect for each other and working together.
We didn't answer the last part, which was re-startups or regrowth plays. Often there is a percentage given, or there is a tie-in in some form. There's an equity play. I haven't heard of too many.
Oh yeah, definitely.
PE firms that don't do that.
For me, it's so obvious. I don't even talk about
it. Is that the story, Coby? Is that pretty normal?
everyone in a startup, from the admin in the reception desk to everyone gets equity. I mean, that's like that's a basic. That's something that it's so normal. It's like, do you give a computer, a laptop to your employees? Of course, I give them a laptop, and of course, I give them equity.
And it's a dream in a way, isn't it? Because there's no money necessarily.
Well, first of all, we give them equity, but it vests over 4 years. It's not like I give them options. Okay, I give them options, I won't. Again, let's not go into all of the details.
No,
but basically, they get options or what's called RSUs that vest over 4 years.
Yes.
So first of all, they have an incentive to stick around because the value grows. Now, the second thing is, this is the best way to align the interest of the employees with the interest of the shareholders, because now they have a vested interest in getting the share price up. So again, that's kind of one of the things that drives me crazy about Australia is, it is so obvious to everyone in Israel, in the US, in the tech industry, that of course you give everyone options and equity. I mean, that's like the basic, because I'd never imagined anyone in the company not having equity. That's part of the motivation when people are in the company. And, talking about Australia, that's one of my big challenges, that the Australian market doesn't understand the very basics of how high tech works. And, people look at equity and they think it's something bad or whatever. Like, last year we even had an issue when we were giving equity to Dadi, our chairman, and they were saying, it's making you not independent or something. And I'm like, you guys are insane. Yeah. I'm aligning my board with the interest of the shareholders. You guys should want me to give more equity, not So yeah, it's definitely. I mean, that's like a basic element of work. You give the work offer, the employment offer, and it's always, as I said, down to the admin and down to everyone in the company. 100% will always have equity.
All right. Well, let's go back a bit. What did you walk into at Weebit? What did you find? What was surprising to you? And what did you think I'm going to have to achieve here?
Well, first of all, I didn't really want to join Weebit. So let's start with the basics. I was working as an independent consultant. I set up my own consulting company called Edacon. I was helping startups set up their worldwide sales teams, sales organizations, and strategies and all of that. And I was really enjoying myself working from home and all of that. That was before Corona and everything. I actually knew about Weebit when it was just being formed, because my neighbor across the street, when they were just starting Weebit, he came to me and he said, Coby, we're starting this semiconductor company. We're looking for a CEO. And I said, well, I'm busy. I tried to help them find someone. I didn't manage to. So 2 years later, was it 2 years? Yeah, it's something like a year and a half, 2 years later, he comes to me and he says, Coby, I need to move to another institution. I can't continue to be a director at Weebit. I recommend that they take you as a director. So I went to meet Dadi, and I went to meet the CEO at the time. With the idea of going to be a director. And then the previous CEO said, I have some personal issues. I can't continue, but Coby seems to be a good candidate. Let's take Coby as a CEO. And I said, no. I'm not going to work in an office and all these traffic jams and blah, blah, blah. And he said, no, but the office is here. It's like 5 minutes away. You don't have a traffic light on the way to the office if you go through this route. And I was there. Okay, being a CEO of a public company, I've never done that before. That can be an interesting challenge, and technology sounds really good. And so I joined Weebit. So that was, October 2017. Mm-hmm. At the time, the company was basically, we had only 2 engineers, 1 engineer here and 1 engineer in France. And the CFO was part-time, the admin was part-time, and that's it. We were 5 people. So it was like, nothing. And I needed to start building the company. We had a big challenge at the time because the original investors in the company were not semiconductor people. It was kind of a unique situation. They were more financial people. And once the company started taking off and we hit the 2-year mark after the listing, their shares were out of escrow and they already were looking to do some other stuff, continuing to turn over their money, et cetera, et cetera. And they were leaving the company. So, suddenly you have people who have 40% of the company starting to massively sell. And that was a crisis. That was a near-death experience because they were selling so much and the share price just went down like crazy. And then no investors wanted to get anywhere near us. And I had to go through a very, very difficult year of just surviving. Basically just, we raised very small amounts of money that were just enough to continue to pay the salaries, but we couldn't really do much. And I have to say thank you to Letty at the time, to our partner in France that we're working with. They were very considerate and helped me out through that period. It was kind of funny when we got to the Corona period, and that's when everything was really going bad around the world. That's when we managed to actually do a round of funding in Australia, where, again, I won't go into all of the details, but we used CPS from Perth, actually, which were really helpful, and I always give them the credit. They really helped us out, and we did a good round, and that's when Weebit finally started taking off.
Is there genuine interest from Australian investors in tech, or we're not listening?
So
I know you've been very polite. You've been very polite. You said how good the ASX is, etc. But a real, you know the world, you know the tech world. Is Australia missing opportunities here?
Definitely 100%. And I've been saying that for a long time. I would say it. And again, I'm Israeli. I say things in a blunt way. I'm shocked at the way that Australia is ignoring semiconductors. This is the number one industry in the world. You have so many countries, governments pouring billions and billions of dollars into this. The U.S. CHIPS Act, everyone heard about it, $52 billion. The European CHIPS Act, Japan, Korea, China, India, Canada. I mean, you name it, countries are pouring billions into semiconductor. They understand that this is the most strategic domain to be in. And somehow Australia is ignoring it. But the regulation in Australia today is anti-high-tech. Okay, it's there's no other way to say it. The basic regulation is decades behind Israel or NASDAQ or whatever, there is so much to fix and improve. If you want to have a real high-tech industry, there are basic things that need to be changed. Now, by the way, maybe this is a good time to mention it. Weebit is not the only semiconductor company on the ASX. There are a few others, very few, but there are a few others. Yeah. And there are, even one or two or a few private companies. We've been talking now about setting up, a semiconductor association in Australia. We actually call it AusSemi, and we're in the process of doing it. There's going to be, for the first time, a big seminar in October, in the end of October, called Semiconductor Australia. I think that's going to be a very important show. Our goal is just to expose the Australian market to semiconductors, because when I go to talk to institutions, when I go to talk to analysts, they really don't understand what we're doing. And it's very hard to get analysts to cover Weebit. Because of that, they just don't know even how to start addressing this. Now, you're talking about a market, the semiconductor market is expected to grow to over $1 trillion in a few years.
Yeah, right.
It's a huge market. This is what fuels everything. This is the petrol of the future. All this AI stuff. What do you think it runs on? It runs on semiconductors. So ignoring this and not enabling. I'm not even talking about actively investing and doing some chip sector stuff, but giving the basics that would enable this industry. Even that is missing right now. As I said, the regulation and stuff needs to be, I don't want to say totally changed, but there needs to be a huge overhaul to change the basic things that prohibit high-tech to grow in Australia.
Coby, before your experience in the world of technology, whether it's semiconductors or just working with people with tech, with the advancements now in AI, you hear the likes of Elon Musk suggesting that there's going to be quite a large cut in the labour force, or where the future of jobs will or not be. What are you anticipating in 10, 15 years for the next generation, outside of tech, but what it's going to affect in corporates or in employment?
Well, AI is going to have a huge impact on us, way more than anything that ever happened, I think, to humankind. Now, first of all, we need to remember, and I'm a person who likes facts and likes to look back at history and learn from history. There have been so many times in history where people said, oh, this new technology, it's just going to create such a massive unemployment. Cars are going to make all of these people who deal with horses, suddenly everyone's going to be unemployed. Or refrigerators, all of these ice makers who would make ice in their whatever facilities, and et cetera, et cetera. And computers, oh my God, they're going to completely make everyone redundant. The reality is that each one of these technologies, when they came out, they just created new kinds of jobs and new kinds of things. All of the political turmoil that we're seeing in the world with the extreme right wing and extreme left wing and all of this fake news. And I mean, AI is already impacting us in more ways than we realize right now. But, I hope that people will know how to use it in the right way and eventually, put it in the right regulation and thinks that it will be used for good and not for bad, or at least more for good than for bad.
Coby, last question. If you're looking back to the young Coby all those years ago, you moved around with mum and dad, but you'd then gone to university and you're about to commence on this interesting career, what advice would you give him now?
Well, I think maybe a couple of things. When I was young, I was a real perfectionist. I always strived to do things to the ultra super best possible way. It took me time to realize that you need to do things so that they are good. But, there's a certain thing called good enough, and beyond that, you're wasting your time and effort and you need to move on. So I think that was one of the things that I learned during my career. Actually, one of my managers gave me that advice. And it hit right on. You need to do things so that they're good enough. They need to be good, but, don't waste more time than that. The second thing is, like I said today, to listen to people. And by the way, listening to people, it's not just what they say, it's their body language. It's everything around it. Understand the people, their culture, their background, and don't just jump to conclusions. I think that's a very important thing when you're communicating with anyone. It doesn't have to do just with sales or things. When you're dealing with anyone, try to understand where they're coming from, what their background is, and what they might be going through, and don't just jump to conclusions.
On that, Coby, I just want to say thank you for giving us your time today in these most pressing of circumstances. I've very much enjoyed it. I've taken away a lot from it. So I wish you all the best and speak to you soon. Thank you again for today.
Well, thank you for this opportunity.
And you've been listening to No Limitations.